Hey guys, welcome back to Tiffany's TVscape. Today I have a special guest with me. I have Oanh-Nhi Nguyen here, who is a writer and director. We're going to be talking about a couple of her short films that were recently screened at Holly Shorts. Oanh-Nhi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany.
Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to talk about The Stand and Little Bird, but before I even jump into your projects, I really just kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about like your backstory, how you even got into film. When I talk to filmmakers, it's always like fascinating to me to hear how they even got to where they are in their career now. So if you could just talk to me a little bit about where your passion for storytelling and film comes from and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started filmmaking at a very young age. I made documentaries in high school, made it about my parents after the war in Vietnam, very similar things to the work that I do now. And yeah, I had like co-edited a documentary in college, but I was really focused on getting involved in like international studies or nonprofit work after college. So I left after college. I went back to my high school to teach just for 6 months. It was a sabbatical. My high school teacher was leaving for 6 months. And so I just covered her for that amount of time. I taught broadcast journalism at my all-girls high school to high school girls. And then for me, that was it. I was like, okay, I think I'm done with film. Partially because I didn't know I could have a career in it. No one around me was in film, never knew a director, producer, none of that. And so then I decided to pursue a career in nonprofit and philanthropy for almost 10 years after that. And I was working mainly on women's rights, girls' rights work, social justice work, and philanthropy. But then during that time, I was still like thinking about screenwriting and writing, and it was always in the back of my mind. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit, turned 30, the foundation I was working at shut down. And that's kind of when I was like, well, I think I want to do film again. And for some reason, I feel like I'd be good at directing. I don't know why, because I literally never saw a director. I literally never was on set ever. I was just like, I think I'd be good at it. And that's when I decided to do my first docuseries, Taking Root. And then I applied to AFI, USC, got into both. And now it's been like 4 years-ish since I got back into film. Technically 3, which is mind-blowing to me. And I've made 10 shorts since then. And I just graduated from AFI a year ago. Still making docs. I'm also making narrative films.
That's amazing. Wow. And I also wanted to say congratulations on your films too, as well, because I
Thank you.
recently watched them, and I thought they were really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you had told me like you started like 3 or 4 years ago, you know what I mean? Like it seems like you've been doing this forever.
Yeah, I think going to AFI definitely helped because like had to do 4 shorts in 2 years, which is
Wow.
I couldn't do that by myself, but I got so much better as a result of it. It's despite how hard the program is and cruel it can feel like, but I think that's why I got a lot better in a short amount of time.
Yeah, for sure. And then with both of your films, you directed and co-wrote. So I was really curious about how you're able to manage both being a writer and a director. One of my favorite actors is Bill Hader, and he had a show on HBO where he was like the director, the writer, he starred in it, produced it, and all that stuff. And when I would watch his interviews, everybody would ask him like, how are you able to manage all those different roles? And he would say that he didn't see it as different things. He saw it as one thing, like one. And so I'm curious if it's for you, is that how you're able to manage it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I like to have co-writers too, so I can kind of dip mainly in directing, but obviously good directing comes from good storytelling. And so if you're not fully immersed in the script, personally for me, from the start, like I come up with the world, the concept, I love to have a partner to talk back and forth to make it better. And I think it's manageable because it still stems from the story I want to tell, the vision I want to tell. And, you know, directing in some ways is about control in a way. So like having the ability to like rate if something feels off or wrong, a dialogue or a scene's missing, I feel like is really important. So it feels like doesn't feel like extra work. It feels like a part of the process, really. Um, but for like documentary, for Taking Root, did in 2023, got into Tribeca in 2023. I did everything. I did like producing, directing, and that's a separate story. I think when you're producing and directing, I think that's when it can get a bit tedious because then you're kind of taken away from the creative sometimes as if you're really solely producing. But I also feel like directing, you also need to help fundraise because that's like, you're the main person that drives the project.
Mhm.
So I would say directing and writing feels more like one, and producing, directing sometimes can feel like you're being pulled in different directions.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never heard it described like that, but I think you breaking it down like that it makes more sense to me now. Because for me, I'm like, I mean, I enjoy writing too, but I feel like writing is
Mm-hmm.
hard. So I'm just
Yes,
I can't even imagine like writing and directing and producing and all these other things. But
100%.
clearly, it can be done because so many people do it. So I'm
Yeah.
also fascinated to hear how people manage it and what is their way of staying sane when doing all of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely love having a co-writer because sometimes like it's just like a lot of pressure when you're the only one writing and you have to deliver. I just work better in collaboration and have a partner. So it does feel really nice to have somebody to try things out while you're focusing on other things, even if like we're really like involved and collaborative. So I think, yeah, writing solely and directing is feels like a lot of pressure
For
to
sure.
that. Yeah.
And then let's talk a little bit about The Stand. That
Mhm.
out of the two, that was the first one I watched of your short films, and I loved it.
Mhm.
I feel like I was pulled into the story immediately, and I love
Mhm.
when filmmakers do that. I love
Mhm.
how you're able to give the audience so much about this family without the characters having to say, they don't have
Mhm.
to say like my parents are split up and my father isn't around or we're struggling. It's like it's clear in the
Yeah.
beginning of the story. So I really felt like this it would just felt really real for lack of a better
Mhm.
word. It felt like somebody that I would see, like, it felt like the people you see when you're going to work or when you're
Mhm.
going to school or like your next door neighbors. It felt like somebody you would know.
Yeah.
Um, and I was curious, what is your approach to directing short films? Because you have to tell this story in such a short amount of time. So, how
Mhm.
are you able to do that without, I guess, taking away from the plot?
Yeah, I mean, short filmmaking is such a craft in itself. I personally think it's really hard because, like, how do you grab people in 10, 15 minutes? Also, sometimes people don't want to watch shorts. They're like, oh, 15 minutes, that's long.
Right.
But it's like, how do you have a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, but that, again, like you said, like grabs you into the story and like carries people want to keep watching, right? And so I really think about of like Issa and Lil Bird and Corey for The Stand. um, Number one, like for me, it's like really important to make things feel real, like the dynamics, the characters, the relationships, the world is really important for me to feel like it's based on truth. And then the second is like taking like a audience member on like a character's journey. Like what would be, like we say, like why, I actually don't love the question why now, but like what is so important in this character's life in this moment for this short, and like what's going to happen to this character that's going to change them from beginning to end. So I think that's kind of the arc we looked at for both. It's like, okay, how is this, what is she now, and how can she change and transform realistically in the end, so that's kind of like the foundation of like how we created our story arc. It's more character based.
Yeah, I love that. I think it worked really well. Um, and I mean, without like giving anything away, when it gets to the part where it seems like some really bad stuff is going to happen, I was kind of wondering like how far it was going to go, um,
Hmm.
bracing myself for it.
Yeah.
And then when you see it, you're kind of like, okay, like maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, which I kind of liked how you took us on this ride kind of. And then by the end, I think I felt like there was still hope there for them.
Hmm.
So I like the way you did that for sure.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and then I was curious too. After watching the film, I kind of had this thought, and I was like, I want to ask her this, but I don't know if this is gonna make sense. So I'm gonna
Go for it. Yeah.
try. So when I was after I watched it, I was kind of thinking about like how your story, but just these types of stories in general that, like I said, that feel really real and they clearly mirror a lot of people's struggles and a lot of immigrant struggles. Um,
Hmm.
when you're making stories like that, like how do you balance kind of keeping it authentic, but also still recognizing that this is your job and this is what you do for a living? Because I think for the most part, people are receptive to it because they're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I feel I relate to this. Like this is people's lives every day." But then you have some that are like, "Oh, I feel like this is kind of capitalizing off of people's struggles," or you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
of feel some type of way about it. And so I guess for people like that, I'm kind of wondering like how you teeter that line of like, I'm trying to tell a real story here, but also this is my job at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the intention of why I'm making something. Um, so because of my documentary background, I do a lot of research before I even write the story, just because I want it to feel again authentic and real. Like people went through this. People like the one of the scenes in the stand. I like heard like a food vendor like kid who works for her parents say that happens a lot. Um, so I think for me, it's really rooted in the intention of why I'm doing it. So for the stand, for example, actually both. I always want to really center Southeast Asian women girl stories, specifically immigrant stories about like for example, Vietnamese refugees, like what we went through after the war, like the struggle that we went through, but also like the power that we had to like still support each other amongst like a lot of tragedy and trauma. But I also don't, I try to gear more on the triumphing, hopeful, without sugaring the struggle, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I find it really important to balance both as a filmmaker. And so that's kind of like the intention in both stories that I rooted in that. And then like when you get on set, it does feel like it because you're like cut okay yeah, again it feels like a job, right? But I try to be present with the actors and see like be rooted in the emotion of the scene and see if the actor is being truthful in that moment. And that's when it feels less like a job, if that makes sense. Like my job is to get the truth out in the moment of a scene and with the actors. um, and the setting up and like all this stuff feels like all right, this is like a process, but I try to be very present when we're doing a shot, to be in the moment instead of thinking about the math of filmmaking, if that makes sense. Which angle is this look, oh, the lighting's bad, like so it's like it is a balance, but you just have to be really rooted in the intention of the why you're doing it, and I think the intention of the scene, so it doesn't just feel like you're just trying to get by. Like this is just
absolutely.
work.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. And I was also thinking about too, like how with these types of films, I think a lot of times you end up having, I don't know if you've personally experienced, but a lot of times I think there's like pushback because people kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's almost too real. Like
Mm-hmm.
with the state of the world today and like the way our government is, kind of just feels like I think because film in particular is such a way for like people to escape reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
they kind of want to go into films watching movies that are like fun or like watching something that's happy or watching something that you're like, I know this would never happen in real life. And I
Yeah.
think the films are like, no, this is real life for so many
Yeah.
people. And I think sometimes people don't want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Too real, and it kind of just reminds you of like a lot of the negative stuff in the world. And so
Mm-hmm.
people that are like that, like what would you say to kind of encourage them to watch types of films or just to support these kind of films because it is important.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And truthfully, like I completely understand. Like there's a reason why during the pandemic Ted Lasso did so well, right? Because like
Right.
like we people just want to laugh, and like this how crazy this administration has been and how like harmful it's been. So I really understand. And like, I'm about to be a mom. So like, I also want levity in my life, enjoy in my life. So I totally understand. But sometimes I, go on Netflix. This happened to me so many times this week. I'm like, what do I want to watch? And I'm just like, it's just like, I don't want to watch any of this shit. It's just like, it just feels so surfacey.
Yeah.
So I think it would be amazing to have both, like a very deep show, but with some levity of a comedy, right? And I get why people seek that out. But I think to your question, like a lot of indie filmmaking is about talking about real things, and like I think because I think filmmakers who are putting so much time and effort to make a film, putting all that labor in, all that like investment in, want to say something, and it comes from personal experiences. And I do think that when we look at classics, we look like a film that moves us. I don't think we think of a reality TV show or, like, I think if you want to watch just comedy and reality TV show, that's cool, but maybe like watch one like indie film just to support us, just
Uh-huh.
because it's so hard to make one. And even if you don't like it, just like at least try it, just to, I think, also root you in like the current moment of what's happening and educating, informing yourself. But I do think it's important for films that have something to say to be entertaining too. I think that's a fair ask for any audience member. You don't want a film that's like preachy either. So I get it. I don't think I have a solution other than please just watch one at least to support indie filmmakers.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and then with Little Bird, I think you kind of answered this question already. I was
Mm-hmm.
about if you did research during the writing process or prior to shooting, because there is, a reference to things that happened in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, so Little Bird is inspired by my docuseries Taking Root. I made like a series of stories of Southeast Asian refugees and how they resettled in Philadelphia after the war in Vietnam. And those were literally the spaces, the world I created was based on truth. Um, and it's also inspired by this real Chinese American housing organizer in Philly when she was in her 20s. She went to see how some refugees resettled, and she said and she walked into a house and there was no windows and it's winter and there's like 23 Vietnamese refugees in one house with just one light bulb, and they weren't related to each other. They were just like literally just like dumped. But also in Philly, there were like buildings that were occupied by Black communities, and they protested the living conditions. They got forced out, and then when the refugees came, it was boarded up actually. And then refugees came, they literally just dumped them in there. Like there's like literal photos of that. So that's what inspired Little Bird. But it's like stories that people don't know about, especially like a failed resettlement system of like how refugees were resettled after the war in Vietnam, because that was the most televised war in the US, but we never see like what happened after. We only see success stories, like bootstrapping stories, which is some true for some refugees, but a lot of them actually, even in Hollywood, had a very like similar condition of what happened in Philly. And I've heard stories in Houston too. So yeah, I did a lot of research for that and was inspired by those people. And yeah, Debbie watched it, the housing organizer, and she said that it felt so real and took her back, especially how the kids behaved, because like the kids were really joyful. The kids didn't know, that it was like awful conditions. They just want to be together. So that felt really great to hear from her.
That's great. That's awesome that you had.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like what you said about kind of being able to just tell another side of the story. Like you said, there are
Mm.
some success stories within a lot of people that didn't have that. And I think that is very important right now, considering, the way that I feel like people are trying to erase history or change.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm glad that you said that. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And then I was curious too, if you had any current projects that you are working on right now that you could talk about.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I'm definitely looking for more dramedy comedy stuff actually. Um, and so I'm working on. I wrote a TV pilot a couple years ago. that I've been pitching. And then there is a dramedy feature that I'm writing, finishing this month, about a very successful Vietnamese therapist. She's like killing it in New York City, best-selling author, kind of like Esther Perel status therapist until she's called to take care of her mom who just had hip surgery. And her mom is a Vietnamese pop star, old Vietnamese refugee pop star. So that's about mother-daughter relationships and like the dynamics between that when you feel like you're healed, but then you have to deal with the person who caused a lot of your angst. So that's a dramedy feature that I'm working on and that I would love to make in 2026.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds really
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the dramedy for sure.
yeah, I'll definitely have to have you back on once that's.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I just wanted you to talk about where people could follow you and how people can keep up with your projects.
Yeah, so just follow me on Instagram. My first and last name, OANHNHI period NGUYEN is where people can follow me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Tiffany. I loved your questions.
Oh, thank you. I try not to ask like I'm not asking the same questions that these people get asked because I know filmmakers they do a ton of interviews and I'm like I'm probably asking the same things over and over.
No, there were a lot that no one asked me, so I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, you take care.
You too. Bye.